Hello, everyone. My name is Jean Vail, and today I'm going to do something different. I'm going to read to you from this little book, which is called My Memories Revisited. It was to me a present from my eldest granddaughter for Christmas a couple of years ago from a group called Story Worth, all one word, Story Worth. And it publishes, as you can see, in complete form, your story, my story. And each week I was given a prompt of something to write about that week. And it, as I say in the beginning of it, it demonstrates how well my granddaughter knows me because I love to write, and this was the perfect gift to give to me. So I've chosen at random some chapters to read to you, and we'll begin with, where did you go on vacations as a child? Remembrances of childhood vacations focus on trips to Santa Barbara when we lived in Salt Lake City. Sister Barbara has told me that that was our destination every summer from Oklahoma and Fort Sam Houston as well. Vacationing in Santa Barbara was a tradition established by Gan when Mother was a girl. They sailed down the coast from Spokane each year to spend New Year's to Easter in the warmer climate. Eventually, my grandparents moved to Santa Barbara and the house on Valerio Street in town. In my memory, Gan and Granddad's high road house in Montecito always beckoned with warmth and welcome. Among the special summertime treats were the jaunts to Sunnyland for a day at the Weirs' beach house. Belonging to longtime friends and former Valerio Street neighbors of Gan and Granddad, the Weirs cottage was among those located along the Rincon, probably half an hour south of Montecito on a frontage road to Coastal Highway 101. In those days, 101 was simply two lanes, one south and one northbound. Railroad tracks paralleled the highway immediately behind the unpresupposing row of rustic cottages that comprised Sunnyland Beach. Indoor plumbing was not among the amenities available, so trips to an outhouse were part of the adventure. So were scratchy woolen one-piece bathing suits that held the sand when wet, picnics on the beach, and the requisite nap for me, the youngest, in a cozy bedroom just off the living room where the adults happily chattered. Meanwhile, Barbara and Lee continued to play outside, their tanning skin much better equipped for so much sun. Despite the indoor nap, I always returned home bright red, destined to dance around in my stinging altogether as Mother plastered me with vinegar. It stung like the dickens, but amazingly, its astringency did the trick. By the next morning, I was still red, but the sunburn's pain was gone. Next door to Gan and Granddad lived the Marattis. Louis Maratti was a pharmacist who owned the drugstore that bore his name, cum liquor and gift departments, an essential fixture of the Montecito community. He and Grace had one son who, at the time I recall, was probably 9 or 10, and no doubt somewhat indulged. He boasted the proud name Josephus Aloysius Vincent Stanislaus Louis Maratti, Jr. Bingo, the Cocker Spaniel, completed the immediate family. Bingo was very sweet but hardly playful, being considerably overweight and slow-moving from eating avocados fallen to the ground from the trees that bordered their lovely garden. Occasionally visiting the Marattis was Grace's younger sister, Ruth, who was apparently quite glamorous. Ruth enjoyed taking nude sunbaths, presumably assuming she was secluded in the central patio of their Spanish-style house. Rumor had it that pre-adolescent Joe found great delight in spying on Ruth from an upstairs window, and may even have dropped a water balloon on his unsuspecting aunt. Frankly, I have no trouble believing the story, as Joe was somewhat of a nemesis to me at 5 or 6. Particularly, I remember being traumatized when he told me in all seriousness that the garden hose in whose spray I had rinsed a just consumed fresh raspberry contained pesticide, and I would no doubt die. I ran in hysterics through the hedge to my grandparents' house, where Aunt Jan had been left in charge of me. With admirable calm for one who was, as yet underexposed to small children, Jan suggested that I should eat some bread and quietly escorted me to the kitchen in pursuit of the remedy. I survived. Sunday afternoon matinees at the Fox Arlington Theater were great treats. The theater itself, which still exists, is architecturally appealing, the walls being embellished with railed balconies and faux street lamps, making it appear that one has been deposited in an old Spanish village. There was always a newsreel, a cartoon, and a feature film, usually Shirley Temple, or a cowboy drama that somehow involved Gene Autry or Roy Rogers playing a handy guitar while sitting around a campfire, singing during a pause in a major roundup or stampede. Not the least of the delights were the little cups of vanilla ice cream with paper-wrapped flat wooden spoons that were passed out, courtesy of the local dairy, as we exited the theater. Good advertising, but I'm not sure it caused our parents to buy more. If I knew who to thank 80-plus years later, I would. What was Santa Barbara like when you were growing up? Who were your best friends? To have grown up from the 3rd grade onward in Santa Barbara was really great good fortune. During most of that time, it was still more of a sleepy little town than the bustling city it has become. The Spanish heritage was treasured, with the name of one street, Sal si puedes, or Leave if you can, lingering in my mind as descriptive of its charm. Cabrillo Boulevard, lined with majestic imperial palms, embraced the shoreline with its unobstructed beaches. One could meander through El Paseo, a cluster of lovely boutique shops and an upscale Spanish restaurant of that name, where my parents' wedding reception had been held, which dominated a central block on State Street. The Fox Arlington Theater, its interior designed architecturally to transport one to a Spanish village, offered Saturday matinees, complete with cartoons and newsreels and those aforementioned ice cream treats. When we first moved from Salt Lake City to take up permanent residence in Santa Barbara, Daddy was stationed at Camp Roberts, north of the city. He was there more than at our home on Moreno Road, but on occasion Granddad Wilson would drive us up the coast for a Sunday visit. I could walk to the Roosevelt School, an easy downhill romp from our Riviera home, but a substantial climb on the return. The name of my neighborhood playmate escapes me, but I was impressed that she had lived until recently on one of the Santa Barbara Islands, quite removed from the amenities to which we were accustomed. Whether it was the threat of impending war that sent her family to the mainland, I don't know, but I remember well the radio broadcasts about Pearl Harbor. In all my 9-year-old piety, I recall declaring on the school playground the next day, how particularly wrong it was to have attacked us on the Sabbath. Where I acquired that language, I'm not quite sure, but I was very self-righteously indignant. Another odd memory that comes to mind is munching on a raw carrot. As my sister Lee and I went down the hill to play kick the can with friends after dinner. I was quite convinced that my night vision was superior to hers as we trudged back uphill in the dark. Our house was next to a fanciful area called Manning Park, whose plantings afforded wonderful hiding places for imaginative play. Other such attractive dedicated spaces were scattered across the hillside, tempting young explorers. Just along Alameda Padre Serra lived another friend who had a big German shepherd who took delight in chasing this frightened little girl who didn't know better than to think I could outrun him. My friend had a luxuriant, deep feather bed, which I relished sinking into half of on occasional sleepovers. With Daddy off to World War II, we moved out to Montecito to join Aunt Jan and my 5-year-old cousin Pick, plus family friend Francis Wyeth for the duration. In a wonderful, sprawling house at 10 Hickson Road, Lee was off to La Cumbre Junior High School and Barbara to Santa Barbara High School by bus every day. Pick and I were enrolled at the Howard School, a private country day run by the maiden sisters Isabel and Esther Howard. It was there that I met lifelong friends Joan Welch and Susie Johnstone. At recess, the main entertainment was climbing into very strictly claimed tree houses. How possession of them was determined, I don't remember, but I shared one with Susie. After school, I sometimes rode my bike up to the elegant Johnstone house on Picacho Lane, with its impressive circular flagstone parking area and multiple rooms. When Susie's parents were out of town, I spent the night with the family housekeeper in charge. Breakfasts were always a wonderful treat. Garnished scrambled eggs and bacon, fresh orange juice, and muffins formally served to us in the round children's dining room. Susie had discovered, probably with the help of her older brothers, where some naughty books were hidden behind more acceptable volumes in her parents' library. Of course, we had to check those out. Meanwhile, Joan and I would spend hours preparing for periodic Joe Dick's fairs. Our mothers and other indulgent adults would come dutifully to buy our crafty creations. Display books of retired wallpaper patterns given to us by a local hardware store provided a wonderful source of supply for making such irresistible things as covered notepads. Sometimes we cooked. A yellow cake with fresh strawberry frosting was a Welch favorite. There was never a wartime shortage of such things as butter in their house. In fact, the pantry's contents were quite amazing. Joan loved to write novels, still does, but I'm not sure if she's ever had anything published. In any case, writing occupied some of our time. So did playing with Shotzi, her lovely Alsatian. By this time, I'd lost any fear of large dogs, though our family pets had been much smaller, Boston Terriers and an English Bulldog. Certainly the latter, our English Bulldog, Roger the Lodger by God, as Daddy called him, has to be included among my childhood friends. Asthmatic breathing and drooling notwithstanding, he usually slept with me. After the war, Daddy wanted a dog who would amble with him on his walks. He even showed Roger Wilco of Oakmart, his pedigree name, in occasional AKC shows in Santa Barbara with Daddy's cane looped through Roger's harness instead of a leash. He managed to get a third-place ribbon in a class of 3, to everyone's delight, despite having tried to give the judge a sloppy kiss. Of course, the highlight for me in living in Montecito was proximity to the Biltmore stables, run by Bill and Peggy Finley, but always to me as a child, Mr. and Mrs. Finley. I literally hung out at the stables after school, making myself as useful as possible, leading horses to the watering trough, helping groom and saddle them for classes or renters. It was there that I met Honorée Thorne, who became another great friend. Her family was from Chicago, donors of the Thorne Rooms at the Art Institute, but spent more time in a lovely beach house not far from the stable. We often had sleepovers, even sometimes camping out on the beach or playing in the nighttime surf under the watchful eye of a live-in sitter. Eventually, Mr. Finley found me useful enough that he let me join Honorée's riding classes. Soon I was helping Mrs. Finley take girls from Marymount on trail rides and exercising boarding horses. I was in seventh heaven. That wonderful experience made it possible for me to help earn my way to Montecito School for Girls by assisting with the riding program there. It was at Montecito, which is now the lovely CCRC, called Casa Dorinda, where my sister Barbara lived, that Glory Post became my most special friend. We, along with Corinne Dillman, were day students, which meant that social life outside of school was possible. Glory lived at the Miramar Hotel in a cottage directly across Eucalyptus Lane from our house. We drove to school together every day. It was a very handy arrangement. Glory was a slow starter in the morning, so her father would hand me the keys to her Ford convertible at the front door. I'd start the car and get it warmed up until Glory emerged, cereal bowl in hand. As I slowly drove the short distance to school, she'd finish her cereal, deposit the empty bowl in the boot, and manage to light a cigarette from which we'd exchange a few furtive puffs before depositing it outside the school gates. Smoking was strictly forbidden at Montecito, which of course made it all the more alluring to teenagers. Our parents, in contrast, were not opposed. Corinne's car, Killer, was a dark green Model A, which meant we all had to learn to drive a stick shift. It also had an amusing horn, as I recall, which gave it extra pizzazz. Corinne and I became closer friends in college days, as she went first to Pine Manor Junior College in the town of Wellesley, and later to Mount Holyoke. After college, we descended on San Francisco as roommates, moving first to an apartment on Sutter and then into 835 Pine Street. Childhood was over, but adult fun had only just begun. Back from Japan, Lieutenant J.G. Thomas Vail stepped off the USS Warwick. Almost simultaneously, Joan Welch re-entered my life, big time, with an invitation from her parents to accompany her on a trip to Europe. It was to be a 3-month odyssey. Let's see how we're doing. All right. This prompt was, how did you get interested in horses and working at the stables? I'm sure that the beginning riding lessons on Army horses at Fort Sam Houston at the age of 6 started it all. Originally, Daddy had been in the mounted field artillery, and he played polo for the Army, so no doubt the genes were there. My sisters and I all 3 took lessons when we lived on the post. along with the swimming pool just across from our quarters and movies nearby for a dime, they were among the privileges available to an officer's children. The love of horses and riding stuck for Barbara and me, but ironically not for Lee, and she eventually married a rancher. No justice, I thought at the time. Because I was the youngest and smallest, the horse assigned to me was Half Pint. I do remember being unseated one time, and the instructor seeing that I immediately climbed aboard again. Tradition demanded that I provide cokes for the entire class, for which Mother graciously obliged. Curiously, I only remember falling off 2 other times. Once was pure carelessness on my part, riding a pony on the trail in Santa Barbara. That was embarrassing. The second was much later in Minnesota when I lost my balance galloping around a curve in the woods and fell off of Lighthouse, the 16-2 hunter Cindy Piper so graciously let me ride. He was so tall, I had to lead him up to a boulder so I could climb up and reach the stirrup to remount. I reported to my orthopedic surgeon's son, Tad, "Guess what? Granny bounces," to which he knowingly replied, "Don't count on it, Mom." Between Fort Sam and Hickson Road, there where we moved when I was in the 6th grade, I don't recall having had opportunities to ride. So I must have been about 11 when I started hanging out at the Biltmore Montecito stables. Mr. Finley, the owner, was indulgent enough not to object, and bit by bit I learned to be useful. He once remarked that I wasn't a natural horsewoman, but that I certainly worked at it. I think that was a fair assessment, but the working at it was for me pure joy. With experience came confidence. As I look back at those teenage years, I can feel how ready I was to try anything. When at a horse show, one of the girls got cold feet at the last minute before a class, he put me on her horse, which I'd never ridden, and sent me in to compete. I didn't win, but I certainly felt flattered and empowered. Another time, Mr. Finley had sent a teenage boy out on Pick, one of my favorites. The stable was located between the railroad tracks and Highway 101. To get to a place for crossing over the highway into the lemon orchards and trails beyond, one had to parallel the tracks for a block or so, riding through the ice plant. Apparently, a train chose that time to pass going northward, and Pick decided to object to the noise, tossed the boy, and headed back to the barn. Mr. Finley told me to ride him back to check on the boy. I'm sure he hated having a girl come up riding his would-be horse. Pick was the one I loved to ride on the beach. In those days, it wasn't forbidden to take horses along Miramar Beach. Our, Pick's, and my favorite thing to do was to scatter the seagulls, resting in flocks on the wet sand. I'd spot a bunch of them up ahead and signal Pick to take off at a gallop through their midst, scattering them all aflutter around us. It got so Pick would start dancing in anticipation when he saw a flock ahead. Great fun. The summer when I was 13, Daddy had returned just before the end of World War II, having been retired for physical disability. We were living in a lovely Spanish house built around a central patio just above the Montecito Country Club. 3 houses uphill from us, a 20-something girl named Jane lived with her parents. Her Arab mare, Smokey, stabled on their property. It was a beautiful little stable with tack room and hay storage and an adjacent corral. Jane was going to Canada for the summer, and it was agreed that I could care for Smokey in exchange for the privilege of riding her. I could keep to the edge of the golf course and join another friend to ride together. Having my, quotes, own horse for the summer was a dream come true. Harrison Ryan, the family friend at whose home Mother was dining when Daddy unexpectedly returned from the war, took an amusing picture of me with Smokey. My hair is long and straight, with bangs falling down over my eyes. Smokey's gray forelock cascades down her face. We were quite a matching pair. My experience taking care of Smokey and working at the stable became instrumental in my being offered a full-ride scholarship to Montecito School for Girls for my last 2 years of high school, where I was entrusted with significant responsibility in the riding program. Dr. Barnes, headmister of the fledgling school, had bought a string of Army horses, and I had the privilege of claiming Captain Cleve as my own. He was a delight and challenged to ride. I remember taking secret pleasure when Cleve gave a friend a hard time when a horse show equitation class the judge required us to switch horses. My friend didn't like having someone else ride her personally owned Black Knight, especially when he proved to be so easy in comparison to the Army horse. I think we'll stop there. Lots of fun memories. Oh, and this is, I'll show you all here. This is a picture that Jeffrey in the dining room took of Tom and me on Thanksgiving, is to use as the cover for it.